The stars looked different from the massive viewing window of the Galactic Confederation courthouse. Karen Daniels stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching the slow dance of spaceships coming and going from the massive space station. Even after 6 months here, she still couldn't believe she was the first human judge appointed to the Intergalactic Supreme Court. Karen smoothed down her black judicial robe, modified to match the traditional human style while incorporating the silver and blue trim that marked all Confederation judges. Her reflection showed a woman in her early 50s with short gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen enough of both human and alien justice systems to know neither was perfect. "Judge Daniels, the council is assembling," said a soft voice behind her. Karen turned to see her assistant, a tall humanoid alien named Ilori. His blue skin seemed to shimmer in the starlight, and his 4 eyes blinked at different times as he handed her a data tablet. "Today is the Patel case," Ilori said. "The other judges are curious about how you will handle it." Karen nodded. Of course they were. The 6 alien judges had been watching her closely since her appointment. The Tellurian judge, with his stone-like features, had openly questioned whether humans were evolved enough for galactic jurisprudence. The Morgan representative, with her feathered crest and sharp eyes, had suggested that humans were too emotional to be impartial. Karen knew what today meant. It wasn't just about Kash Patel and his company. It was about proving that humanity deserved its place among the stars. "Let's not keep them waiting," she said. The central courtroom of the Confederation courthouse was designed to accommodate beings from over 50 different species. The room was vast, with seating that ranged from standard chairs to water tanks, for aquatic species to gravity-free floating sections for those who came from low-gravity worlds. Karen took her seat at the curved judge's bench, nodding to her colleagues. Judge Zextool of the Morgan Collective gave a slight bow of her feathered head. Judge Krusha, the massive stone-like Tellurian, merely blinked his glowing eyes in acknowledgement. The courthouse AI announced the case. Matter 7729B, Galactic. Confederation versus Terraform Solutions and Kash Patel, Chief Executive. The doors at the far end of the courtroom opened, and Kash Patel entered, flanked by a team of lawyers from at least 3 different species. Patel walked with the confidence of someone used to getting his way. He was a fit man in his 60s, with a perfectly trimmed beard and expensive clothes that shouted wealth without saying a word. He nodded at the judges but gave Karen a slightly longer look, perhaps hoping for human solidarity. Karen kept her face neutral. She had reviewed the case files thoroughly. Terraform Solutions was accused of illegally developing a moon that turned out to be inhabited by a previously unknown sentient species called the Luminari. The allegations were serious: ecological destruction, cultural genocide, and violation of first contact protocols. The lead prosecutor, a tall insectoid being named Senior Advocate Shin, approached the center of the room. His translator device hummed as he spoke. "Honored judges, the facts of this case are clear. The defendant, Kash Patel, ordered the terraforming of the third moon of Proxima Centauri 6, despite preliminary scans showing unusual energy signatures. These signatures were, as we now know, the Luminari, a sentient crystalline species with a complex society and rich history spanning 50,000 years. Holographic images appeared above the courtroom floor, beautiful crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light, now shattered and broken. Beside them, images of massive terraforming machines digging into the moon's surface, crushing everything in their path. Terraform Solutions not only ignored these signs of life, but actively concealed them," continued Shin. "They proceeded with their development plans, destroying sacred Luminari sites and causing the death of countless crystalline beings, all to turn a profit selling the terraformed moon to developers." Patel leaned over to whisper something to his human lawyer, who nodded and made a note. He didn't look concerned, just annoyed, as if this were a minor inconvenience in his busy schedule. "The defense will show," Shin concluded, "that Mr. Patel personally approved this project despite warnings from his own staff, motivated by the rare minerals contained within the luminary formations. This is not merely corporate negligence, but willful destruction for profit. The chief defense lawyer, a human named Gregory Winters, rose next. He was tall and lean with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Honored judges," he began. "My client regrets any misunderstanding that has led to these unfortunate allegations. Terraform Solutions conducted standard preliminary scans of the moon, which showed unusual energy patterns, yes, but nothing that definitively indicated sentient life according to Confederation protocols." Karen noticed Judge Zextool's feathers bristle slightly at this claim. The Luminari, while certainly deserving of our respect and protection, now that we are aware of them, do not communicate or manifest in ways that our standard first contact protocols are designed to detect. They do not build structures as we understand them. They do not use technology as we recognize it. They do not communicate in ways our translation systems can easily interpret. Winters paced slowly, his voice reasonable and calm. How can Mr. Patel or his company be held responsible for failing to identify a life form that even the Confederation's own exploratory teams had missed in their surveys of the Proxima Centauri system? Karen glanced at Patel, who was nodding along with his lawyer's words. There was something in his expression, not concern for the harm done, but calculation. He was treating this like any other business problem to be managed. Judge Cruzat spoke, his deep voice rumbling like stones grinding together. "The Confederation's surveys are preliminary. They do not authorize development. That requires a full ecological assessment, which your company failed to complete properly." "With respect, Your Honor," Winters replied smoothly, "we did complete the required assessment. We have filed all the proper documentation." "Documentation can be falsified," said Judge Zextool, her translator giving her voice a metallic edge. Winters smiled tightly. "A serious allegation, Your Honor, for which the prosecution has provided no evidence." Karen studied the data tablet before her, reviewing the timeline of events. Something wasn't adding up. The initial survey had flagged the energy signatures for further study, but somehow the final assessment had cleared the moon for development just 3 days later. Unusually fast for such a process. "I would like to hear from the project's lead environmental officer," Karen said, speaking for the first time, "the one who signed off on the final assessment." Winters hesitated briefly. "Dr. Howard Wells is unfortunately no longer with the company. We have submitted his written reports as evidence." "And where is Dr. Wells now?" Karen asked. "I believe he has retired to one of the outer colonies," Winters said. "We can attempt to locate him if the court deems it necessary." Judge Zextool leaned forward. "The court does deem it necessary." Patel shifted in his seat, his expression darkening slightly. The first session continued with technical testimony about terraforming procedures and Confederation regulations. Throughout it all, Karen noticed how Patel seemed bored rather than concerned, checking his personal comm device when he thought no one was watching. As the court prepared to adjourn for the day, a commotion broke out at the entrance. A human man pushed past the security drones, his clothes rumpled as if he'd traveled a long way in a hurry. "I need to speak to the court. I'm Alan Nguyen, Environmental Assessment Officer for Terraform Solutions. I have evidence about what really happened on that moon." Security officers moved to intercept him, but Karen raised her hand. "Let him approach." The man walked forward, clearly nervous but determined. He held a data crystal in his shaking hand. "The assessment was faked," he said, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent courtroom. "I was there. We found them, the Luminari. They tried to communicate with us. Patel ordered us to ignore it to proceed anyway. He said..." Nguyen swallowed hard, then continued. "He said if they weren't advanced enough to stop us, they weren't advanced enough to matter." All eyes turned to Kash Patel, whose face had gone very still. For the first time since the trial began, he looked worried. Karen met his gaze across the courtroom. In that moment, she knew this case would define not just Patel's fate, but humanity's place in the stars. As the first human judge on the Galactic Confederation Court, her decision would show the galaxy what humans truly valued: profit or justice. The court adjourned for the day, but the real trial was just beginning. The second day of the trial began with tension filling the vast courtroom. News of Alan Nguyen's surprise appearance had spread throughout the space station. The public viewing areas were packed with beings from dozens of species, their eyes, sensory organs, and recording devices all focused on the proceedings. Karen Daniels arrived early, reviewing the data Crystal and Nguyen had provided. The contents were disturbing. Video logs showed Terraform Solutions workers discovering strange crystal formations that pulsed with inner light. When the workers approached, the crystals changed colors and arranged themselves in complex patterns. Any sentient being could see this was communication, not random natural behavior. Most damning was a recorded conversation between Nguyen and Kash Patel. In it, Nguyen pointed out the unusual behavior of the crystals. "They're responding to us, sir," Nguyen said in the recording. "I believe they're trying to communicate." Patel's recorded voice was dismissive. "We don't have time for this. The buyers are expecting delivery in 3 months. Do you know how much money we'll lose if we delay?" "But sir, this could be a new sentient species. Confederation law requires a full survey only if we find signs of technological civilization," Patel interrupted. "I don't see any cities or spaceships, do you? They're just fancy rocks. If they were really intelligent, they'd have found a way to contact the Confederation before now." "That's not how it works, sir. The first contact protocols will cost us billions. Look, file your report saying we found interesting but non-sentient crystal formations. We'll send a science team back after the project is complete. If there's anything still there to study, they can study it then." The recording ended with Nguyen protesting and Patel threatening his job. Karen sat back, troubled by what she'd heard. This wasn't just corporate negligence. This was knowing and willful destruction of a sentient species for profit. When court convened, Alan Nguyen was the first witness called. He sat nervously in the witness stand, a small human figure surrounded by the grand alien architecture of the courtroom. "Mr. Nguyen," began Senior Advocate Shin, "please tell the court about your role at Terraform Solutions." "I was an environmental assessment officer," Nguyen said. His voice shook slightly, but grew stronger as he continued. "My job was to survey planets and moons before terraforming, to ensure there was no sentient life or rare ecosystems that should be protected." "And what did you find on the third moon of Proxima Centauri VI?" Nguyen leaned forward. "We found the Luminari. We didn't know their name then, but we found them. Crystal formations that responded to our presence, that changed colors and arrangements when we approached or spoke. Did you believe them to be sentient?" "Yes. They showed clear signs of organized response to stimuli. They weren't just reflecting our scanners, they were reacting to them, adapting to them. When we tried different communication methods, they responded differently. That shows intelligence." Karen watched Kash Patel as Nguyen testified. The businessman's face was hard, his jaw tight. He whispered constantly to his lawyers, who looked increasingly concerned. "And what happened when you reported this to Mr. Patel?" Shin asked. "He told me to ignore it, to falsify my report." Nguyen's voice caught. "I refused at first, but he threatened to fire me and make sure I never worked in the field again. I had family depending on me. I'm ashamed to say I gave in." Judge Zexatul leaned forward, her feathered crest rising in what Karen had learned was a sign of intense interest. "Why have you come forward now, human?" Nguyen looked down. "I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, knowing what we did and what I helped do. When I heard the case had reached the Confederation Court, I knew I had to tell the truth no matter the cost." Defense lawyer Gregory Winters stood for cross-examination. His approach was immediate and aggressive. "Mr. Nguyen, isn't it true you were fired from Terraform Solutions 6 months ago for incompetence?" Nguyen flinched. "I was let go after I continued to raise concerns about the Luminary Moon project. Yet you waited until now to come forward with these allegations. Why not immediately after your termination?" "I was afraid. The company made me sign non-disclosure agreements. They threatened legal action if I spoke out." Winters paced before the witness stand. "So you're violating legally binding agreements by being here today. Should the court trust the word of someone who breaks contracts when it's convenient?" Judge Crusaw's deep voice rumbled through the courtroom. "The Confederation Court recognizes that whistleblower protections supersede corporate confidentiality when sentient lives are at stake. Winters nodded stiffly. Nevertheless, Mr. Nguyen's testimony is uncorroborated and motivated by revenge against his former employer. The data crystal, Karen said, contains recordings that support his claims. Recordings that could easily be manipulated, Winters countered. We request time for our technical experts to examine them. The court granted a brief recess for both sides to review the evidence. Karen used the time to study Patel more carefully. The businessman showed no remorse, only calculation. He seemed to be assessing costs and benefits as if the trial were just another business challenge to overcome. When court resumed, a new witness was called. Dr. Lisa Fuller, a xenobiologist specializing in non-carbon-based life forms. Dr. Fuller, asked Advocate Shin, based on your examination of the surviving luminari, what can you tell us about them? Dr. Fuller, a serious woman with kind eyes, looked directly at the judges. The luminari are a silicon-based crystalline life form with a complex social structure. They communicate through light pulses and vibrations. Their crystal formations are not just their bodies, but their civilization, their knowledge, history, and culture are stored within the crystalline structures themselves. And the impact of the terraforming operations? Dr. Fuller's voice grew soft. Catastrophic. Imagine if someone burned down every library, museum, and school on Earth while also killing a large percentage of the population. The knowledge lost can never be fully recovered. Karen noticed several of the alien judges shifting uncomfortably. The Tellurian judge, Krushaw, whose own species had a similarly long-lived culture, seemed particularly disturbed. With the court's permission, Shin said, I would like to call a representative of the luminari to testify. A murmur ran through the courtroom as a containment field was brought in. Inside floated 3 crystal formations, each about the size of a human head, pulsing with soft blue and green light. A specialized translator was activated, converting the light pulses to speech. The voice that emerged was strangely musical, with harmonics that made Karen think of wind chimes. We are the rememberers, the voice said. We speak for those who were shattered. The courtroom fell silent. Even Patel seemed affected, staring at the floating crystals with a mixture of fascination and unease. For 50,000 years we grew our knowledge in peace, the luminari continued. We had no reason to fear the sky. We did not know others existed who would see us as things to be crushed. Images appeared in the air, projections created by the luminari's light. They showed their world before the terraforming, vast fields of crystals arranged in beautiful complex patterns. Then came the machines, massive and relentless, grinding everything to dust. The loss cannot be measured in your terms, the luminari said. The rememberers of 16 generations were shattered. Their knowledge, their songs, their very being, gone forever. Karen looked at her fellow judges and saw something rare, unanimous, emotion across species. The Morrigan judge's feathers were fully extended in distress. The Tellurian stone face had deep cracks appearing, their equivalent of tears. Then she looked at Kash Patel. For the first time, he wasn't whispering to his lawyers or making notes. He was staring at the luminari, and in his eyes Karen saw the first flicker of understanding of what he had done. The day's session ended with the luminari's testimony hanging in the air. As Karen prepared to leave, Judge Zextool approached her. Your kind has much to answer for, the Morrigan said, her feathers still bristling. One human's actions don't define our species, Karen replied calmly. Perhaps not, Zextool conceded, but your judgment in this case may well define how the Confederation views humanity for generations to come. Karen nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility as she watched Kash Patel being escorted from the courtroom, his confident facade beginning to crack. The third day of the trial brought a shift in the defense strategy. Gregory Winters approached the bench before proceedings began, requesting a private meeting with all 7 judges. Karen and her colleagues were led to a conference room adjacent to the courtroom, where the air felt heavy with tension. My client wishes to propose a settlement, Winters said once the doors were sealed. Terraform Solutions will set aside 50 million credits for restoration efforts on the Luminary Moon and withdraw all development claims. Judge Zextool's feathers ruffled in what Karen now recognized as indignation. 50 million? The damage done is worth billions. With respect, Winters replied smoothly, there is precedent in Confederation law for corporate settlements in similar cases. The Rigelian mining incident of 2149 was settled for far less, and that affected an oxygen-breathing species with more recognizable sentience markers. Karen noticed how Winters emphasized recognizable, as if the luminaries' crystalline nature somehow made them less worthy of full compensation. She felt a flare of anger but kept her face neutral. And what of personal responsibility? Asked Judge Crucia, his stone-like features grinding together. Your client made these decisions himself, according to the evidence. Winters smiled thinly. Terraform Solutions accepts corporate responsibility. Mr. Patel, as CEO, naturally regrets any oversight, but Confederation law has traditionally recognized the separation between corporate and personal liability. Karen leaned forward. Has your client expressed any personal regret for his actions? Winters hesitated just long enough for Karen to note it. Mr. Patel deeply regrets the unfortunate situation and is committed to making amends through the company's resources. The judges exchanged glances. Karen could sense they were unimpressed with the offer, but corporate settlements were indeed common in Confederation courts. The legal system had been designed primarily by older spacefaring species who had organized themselves into vast corporate collectives centuries ago. The concept of personal responsibility had faded from their legal traditions. We will consider the offer and inform both parties of our decision, said Chief Judge Vordax, the eldest of the alien judges, whose translucent body glowed with internal light. When they returned to the courtroom, Karen watched Patel carefully. He sat confidently, even smiling slightly at his lawyers. He believed money would solve his problem. 50 million credits, a drop in the bucket of his personal fortune, paid by his company rather than himself. Senior Advocate Shin called his next witness, Ryan Collins, former Chief Financial Officer of Terraform Solutions. Collins was a nervous man with thinning hair who couldn't seem to look directly at Patel. Mr. Collins, Shin began, can you explain the financial structure of the Luminary Moon project? Collins nodded, bringing up financial charts on the courtroom display. The project was unusually structured. Normally, Terraform Solutions develops a world and then sells it upon completion. In this case, Mr. Patel created a separate holding company that purchased mining rights before terraforming began. And why was that significant? The luminary crystals contain rare elements used in quantum computing. The separate company, personally owned by Mr. Patel, not by Terraform Solutions, extracted these elements before the terraforming machines moved in. The estimated value of these extracted materials was 3 billion credits. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Karen saw several of her fellow judges lean forward with interest. So Mr. Patel personally profited from the materials harvested from the luminary formations? Shin asked. Yes, the company records show 2 billion credits in transfers to his personal accounts from the sale of these materials. Karen glanced at Patel, whose confident expression had faltered. His lawyers were huddled together, whispering urgently. Gregory Winters rose for cross-examination. His earlier smoothness had an edge of desperation. Mr. Collins, isn't it standard practice for executives to have multiple business interests? Yes, but not to structure them in ways that create conflicts with their primary companies, Collins replied. The mining operation damaged the moon's crust, making the terraforming more difficult and expensive for Terraform Solutions. Mr. Patel essentially sacrificed his company's profits to increase his personal gains. Winters tried several more angles, but Collins held firm. When he was dismissed, Winters requested a recess to confer with his client. The judges granted a 1-hour break. Karen used the time to review the financial records Collins had provided. The numbers told a clear story. Patel had personally made billions from the destruction of the Luminari, while setting up his company to take any legal blame. When court resumed, Karen was surprised to see Kash Patel himself take the stand. This was a risky move for any defendant. Mr. Patel, began Winters, now in damage control mode. Did you intend harm to any sentient beings when you approved the Proxima Centauri 6th moon project? Patel straightened his expensive jacket. Absolutely not. Had I known the crystals were sentient, I would never have proceeded. This was an unfortunate misunderstanding, nothing more. And the separate mining company? Standard business diversification. I couldn't have known those particular elements were important to the Luminari. Karen watched him closely. His words sounded rehearsed, his regret manufactured. She could see several of her fellow judges had similar doubts. When senior advocate Chin rose for cross-examination, the insectoid prosecutor moved with unusual intensity. Mr. Patel, the court has heard the recording where Mr. Nguyen specifically told you the crystals showed signs of sentience. Was he lying? Patel shifted uncomfortably. He expressed a theory, not a certainty. Our scientists disagreed. Which scientists? No scientific reports supporting this view have been submitted to the court. They advised me verbally. How convenient. Shin's translator gave his voice a buzzing quality when agitated. And did these unnamed scientists also advise you to extract 2 billion credits worth of materials from living beings before destroying their civilization? Objection, Winters called out. Argumentative. Sustained, said Chief Judge Vordax. Rephrase, advocate. Shin's compound eyes gleamed. Mr. Patel, did you order the mining operation to be completed before terraforming began? Yes, for efficiency. Reasons. Not because you knew the crystals might be recognized as sentient beings and protected before you could extract their valuable elements? Patel's composure slipped. That's absurd. I'm a businessman, not a monster. A businessman who made 2 billion credits from the destruction of an ancient civilization. Winters objected again, but the damage was done. Karen could see doubt in the eyes of the spectators and her fellow judges. Patel's calculated responses weren't helping his case. As the day's session neared its end, the Luminari representatives requested to address the court again. Their crystal forms pulsed with deep red light as their translator spoke. We have been observing the human called Patel. We sense no regret from him, only calculation. In our culture, true remorse begins the healing of harm. Without it, wounds remain open. The crystalline beings shifted, forming new patterns. We do not seek vengeance. We seek understanding and prevention of future harm. If this human cannot understand what he has done, he may cause similar harm elsewhere. Karen felt a chill at these words. The Luminari had identified something she had sensed as well. Patel viewed this trial as a business problem to solve, not a moral reckoning. As court adjourned for the day, Karen remained in her seat, thinking. Confederation law had clear precedents for corporate settlements, but those precedents had been established by species with very different concepts of justice than humans had developed. In her quarters that evening, Karen reviewed Earth's legal history. Throughout human civilization, from Hammurabi's Code to the Nuremberg trials to the Corporate Responsibility Acts of the 2090s, personal accountability had remained a cornerstone of human justice. Corporations might pay fines, but individuals who made decisions faced consequences. She thought about what this case meant not just for the Luminari, but for humanity's place in the galactic community. If she followed standard Confederation procedure, Terraform Solutions would pay a modest fine, and Patel would keep his billions. Is that how humanity wanted to be seen among the stars? As a species that valued profit over accountability, as she prepared for the final day of trial, Karen knew her decision would set a precedent that would shape how all aliens viewed humanity for centuries to come. The weight of that responsibility kept her awake long into the station's artificial night. The final day of the trial began with a solemn atmosphere. The public viewing areas were filled beyond capacity, with beings from across the Confederation watching remotely. This case had captured attention throughout the galaxy, not just for the fate of the Luminari, but as a test of how humanity would conduct itself in galactic justice. Karen entered the courtroom and took her place among the other 6 judges. She had slept little, spending most of the night reviewing precedents and considering her options. The other judges seemed to sense her determination. Judge Zexatul gave her a curious look. head tilted in the Morrigan gesture of interest. Chief Judge Vordax opened the proceedings. Both sides have presented their evidence and arguments. Before we move to final statements, the bench has a few additional questions. Judge Crusoe spoke first, his stone voice rumbling through the chamber. Mr. Patel, you have claimed that you would not have proceeded had you known the crystals were sentient beings. Yet we have heard testimony and recordings, proving you were informed of this possibility. How do you reconcile these contradictions? Patel straightened in his seat. He had changed his approach overnight, appearing more humble, with simpler clothes and a practiced expression of regret. Your Honor, I received conflicting information. While Mr. Nguyen raised concerns, our scientific team's initial assessment suggested the crystal formations were simply unusual natural phenomena. In hindsight, I should have ordered more thorough testing. Karen noted how he avoided direct responsibility, shifting blame to unnamed scientists. She decided to press further. Mr. Patel, she said, the financial records show you personally extracted 2 billion credits worth of materials from the luminary formations before terraforming began. Were you aware these materials were actually part of living beings? Patel hesitated. I was not certain. The materials had commercial value regardless of their origin. So you prioritized their commercial value over determining whether they were alive? Gregory Winters stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. My client has already expressed regret for proceeding without complete information. I'm not asking about his regret, Karen said firmly. I'm asking about his priorities at the time decisions were made. Chief Judge Vordax nodded. The question is permitted. Please answer, Mr. Patel. Patel's facade of humility slipped slightly. I am a businessman. I assess opportunities based on potential return. Yes, I prioritize the commercial aspect. That was my job. Karen nodded, letting his words hang in the air. Several spectators murmured, and she noticed the luminary representatives pulsing with rapid flashes of light, their equivalent of intense emotion. Judge Zexatul posed the next question. Mr. Patel, you have offered 50 million credits for restoration efforts. How did you arrive at this figure? It's a standard percentage of project value used in previous Confederation settlements, Patel replied promptly. We believe it's both fair and generous. Have you consulted with luminary representatives about what would be required for actual restoration? Patel blinked, clearly caught off guard. No. That would be part of the implementation phase after settlement approval. The Morrigan judge's feathers rippled. So you decided what was fair and generous without consulting those you harmed? Before Patel could respond, Senior Advocate Shin requested permission to call one final witness, Dr. Ilara Jones, a xenobiologist specializing in crystalline life forms. Dr. Jones was a serious older woman with gray hair and steady hands. She had spent the past month on the damaged luminary moon, assessing the extent of destruction. Dr. Jones, Shin began, based on your assessment, what would be required to restore the luminary civilization? Jones displayed holographic images of the moon's surface, vast areas reduced to rubble where crystal formations had once stood. The luminary reproduce and grow very slowly, she explained. Their formations are not just physical bodies but repositories of knowledge and history. The destruction is comparable to burning down every library, museum, and university on Earth, while also killing a significant portion of the population. She brought up charts showing timelines. With intensive support, including providing safe environments for growth and specialized equipment to help preserve and reconstruct damaged crystals. Basic restoration would take at least 50 years. Full recovery of their civilization might take centuries. And the cost of such efforts? Our preliminary estimate is a minimum of 3 billion credits for the first decade alone. This includes specialized equipment, research teams, and protection systems. Karen watched Patel's reaction. His face had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the enormous figures. Dr. Jones, Karen asked, is there any technology that could accelerate this recovery? There are experimental crystalline regeneration techniques being developed by the Tellurian Science Academy. With proper funding and focus, these might help. but they would need to be adapted specifically for luminary physiology. Judge Cruja nodded slightly at this mention of his species research. After Dr. Jones stepped down, both sides presented their closing arguments. Gregory Winters emphasized precedent, corporate responsibility, and Patel's willingness to settle. Senior advocate Shin focused on the personal choices Patel had made and the massive scale of harm done for personal profit. As the arguments concluded, Chief Judge Vordax announced that the judges would deliberate and render their verdict the following day. The 7 judges gathered in their private chamber. The alien judges seemed to expect a standard corporate settlement with perhaps some additional penalties given the severity of the case. "The precedents are clear," said Judge Vordax, his translucent body glowing softly. "Corporate responsibility is satisfied by appropriate financial restitution and withdrawal of development rights." Karen took a deep breath. "With respect, I believe, this case requires us to consider more than just corporate liability." The other judges turned to her with varying expressions of surprise and curiosity. "In human jurisprudence," she continued, "we have a long tradition of holding individuals accountable for decisions they personally make, especially when those decisions cause grave harm to others." "This is a Confederation court," Judge Crusoe rumbled. "Not a human court." "Yes," Karen agreed. "But as the first human judge appointed to this court, I believe I have a responsibility to bring human perspectives to our deliberations, just as each of you brings the legal traditions of your species." She brought up the financial records on the chamber's display. "Mr. Patel personally profited 2 billion credits from the destruction of living beings. He did this knowing there were serious questions about their sentience. He specifically structured the operation to ensure his personal gain, even at the expense of his own company." Judge Zextool's feathers shifted thoughtfully. "What are you proposing?" "Personal accountability," Karen said. "A significant personal fine, paid from his own fortune, not his company's accounts, and personal involvement in the restoration efforts." The alien judges exchanged glances. This was a departure from standard procedure, but not without merit. "The luminari themselves spoke of the importance of true remorse," Karen continued. "In human justice, we have found that personal accountability often leads to genuine understanding of harm caused. Mr. Patel needs to feel the consequences of his actions, not just watch his company pay a fine he won't personally notice." "Judge." Vordax's glow pulsed slowly, a sign of deep consideration. "What specific penalty do you propose?" Karen had spent all night considering this question. The number needed to be large enough to matter to a billionaire, but not so large as to seem vindictive. It needed to create genuine impact while leaving him resources to rebuild. Most importantly, it needed to send a clear message about human values to the Confederation. 500 million credits, she said firmly. Paid from his personal accounts to the Luminary Restoration Fund, and 5 years of his personal time working on the restoration project, applying his considerable skills to helping rebuild what he destroyed. The chamber fell silent as the alien judges considered her proposal. Finally, Judge Zextool spoke. "In the Morrigan justice tradition, we believe harm must be felt to be understood. I support Judge Daniels's proposal." One by one, the other judges considered, and then agreed. Some had reservations about the departure from precedent, but all recognized the unique nature of the case and the importance of showing respect for diverse justice traditions within the Confederation. As they prepared to return to the courtroom, the next day, Karen felt the weight of responsibility. She would be setting a precedent not just for this case, but for how humanity's concepts of justice would be integrated into galactic law. She only hoped she had found the right balance between accountability and mercy, between human traditions and Confederation norms. Outside the deliberation chamber, the news of the impending verdict had spread throughout the station. The galaxy waited to see what message the first human judge on the Confederation court would send to the stars. The day of the verdict arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation that seemed to vibrate through the space station. News of the case had spread throughout the Confederation. Many species were watching closely to see how the first human judge would handle this landmark case. Karen Daniels prepared carefully that morning, smoothing her judicial robes and checking that the silver and blue trim that marked her as a Confederation judge was properly aligned. She knew that today she represented not just herself, but humanity's values and sense of justice. The courtroom was completely silent as the 7 judges entered and took their places. Karen could feel thousands of eyes on her, both in the room and watching remotely from across the stars. Kash Patel sat at the defense table, dressed in a simple dark suit, his lawyers flanking him nervously. For once, his confident smile was absent. Chief Judge Vordak spoke first, his translucent body glowing with formal blue light. In the matter of the Galactic Confederation versus Terraform Solutions and Kash Patel, this court has reached a unanimous verdict. A ripple of surprise moved through the spectators. Unanimous verdicts were rare in the diverse Confederation court. The charge of violating first contact protocols, we find the defendant, Terraform Solutions, guilty. Patel nodded slightly. This was expected, and his company was prepared for the standard fine. On the charge of ecological destruction of a protected environment, we find the defendant, Terraform Solutions, guilty. Again, no surprise. These were the corporate charges that would typically result in a monetary settlement. Judge Vordax continued. As is standard in such cases, Terraform Solutions will pay a fine of 200 million credits to the Confederation Environmental Restoration Fund and will surrender all development rights to the moon in question. Patel's lawyers nodded, looking relieved. This was within the range they had anticipated. Then Judge Vordax turned slightly, indicating that Karen should deliver the next part of the verdict. She rose, feeling the weight of the moment. This court has also considered the personal responsibility of Kash Patel, who made the key decisions in this case. Her voice was clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the vast room. Based on the evidence presented, including financial records showing Mr. Patel personally profited 2 billion credits from the extraction of materials from living luminari, the court finds that corporate penalties alone are insufficient. Patel straightened in his chair, his expression changing from calm acceptance to alarm. Kash Patel, Karen continued, you are hereby ordered to pay a personal fine of 500 million credits to be drawn from your personal accounts, not corporate funds. This money will go directly to the Luminary Restoration Project. Gasps and murmurs filled the courtroom. Such a personal penalty was unprecedented in Confederation law. Furthermore, Karen said, her gaze fixed directly on Patel, you are sentenced to 5 years of mandatory service with the Restoration Project, where you will apply your considerable skills and knowledge to help rebuild what you destroyed. Patel's face had gone pale. That's impossible. You can't. Silence, ordered Judge Krusha, his stone voice cracking like thunder. Karen continued. This court recognizes that sentient life takes many forms across our galaxy. The Luminari may not build cities or spaceships as humans do, but their civilization is ancient and valuable. They store their knowledge, history, and culture within their crystalline structures you ordered destroyed for profit. She paused, letting her words sink in. In human justice traditions, we believe that true understanding of harm comes through personal accountability. The fine represents 1/4 of your personal profit from this venture. The service requirement will give you the opportunity to understand firsthand the harm caused and to contribute meaningfully to healing it. Patel had regained some composure, though his hands gripped the table before him. Your Honors, this is unprecedented. I request time to appeal this decision. Judge Zexatul spoke, her feathers bristling. The verdict is unanimous and final. Confederation, law gives this court authority to create appropriate remedies when existing precedents are insufficient. Karen addressed Patel again. This sentence is not merely punishment. It is an opportunity for redemption. Your business skills and resources, directed toward restoration rather than exploitation, could make a significant difference to the Luminary's recovery. She turned slightly to address the floating crystal formations representing the Luminary. Does this judgment satisfy the Luminary's request for understanding and prevention of future harm? The crystals pulsed with soft blue and gold light as their translator spoke. It is acceptable. We sense the wisdom in your approach. The human must understand what was lost to prevent such loss elsewhere. Gregory Winters was on his feet now, trying one last argument. Your Honors, my client's wealth is tied up in complex investments. Liquidating 500 million credits quickly would cause economic disruption across multiple systems. Judge Vordax raised a hand to silence him. The court will appoint a financial administrator to ensure the fine is paid in an orderly manner over one standard year. The service requirement begins immediately. Karen watched Patel carefully. The businessman seemed to be going through stages of emotion. Shock, anger, calculation, and finally, just beginning, a glimmer of understanding. He looked at the Luminari representatives, perhaps truly seeing them as beings rather than resources, for the first time. As the court prepared to adjourn, Karen made one final statement. This case has presented this court with new questions about how we balance corporate and personal responsibility across our diverse legal traditions. As the first human judge to serve on this court, I believe this verdict reflects the best of human justice: accountability, proportionality, and the opportunity for meaningful redemption. The court session ended, but Karen remained in her seat, for a moment watching as Patel was led away. His shoulders were slumped, his confident facade cracked. For the first time, he looked like a man facing the reality of what he had done. 3 months later, Karen received the first report from the Luminari moon. The restoration project was underway, with scientists from a dozen species working together to help the crystalline beings recover. To everyone's surprise, Kash Patel had thrown himself into the work with unexpected dedication. The report included a message from the project director. Mr. Patel has been applying his business and organizational skills to make our operation more efficient. He has also contributed an additional 200 million credits of his own money to fund new research into crystalline regeneration techniques. Most surprisingly, he spends hours each day simply sitting with the Luminari, learning their light language, and listening to their stories. Attached was an image that made Karen pause. It showed Patel sitting cross-legged on the ground, his expensive clothes replaced by practical work gear, his face lit by the glow of a small Luminari crystal resting in his open hands. His expression was one she had never seen during the trial: humble, attentive, and genuinely moved. 6 months after that, Karen visited the moon herself. The restoration work was progressing faster than expected, with new Luminari formations beginning to grow in protected areas. She found Patel working alongside a team developing special nutrient solutions to accelerate crystal growth. Judge Daniels, he said when he saw her, his voice lacking its former arrogance. I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to see the progress myself, she replied. Patel gestured to the growing crystal formations around them. They're teaching me their history. Did you know they've been recording the light from the stars for 50,000 years? They can show you how constellations looked before human ancestors even left Africa. Karen studied him carefully. Do you regret the court's decision? Patel was quiet for a long moment. I was angry at first, humiliated. I thought my lawyers would find a way to overturn it. He looked at the crystals growing nearby. But now, I understand what you were trying to do. What I destroyed wasn't just valuable. It was irreplaceable. Except, maybe not entirely irreplaceable, not if I help them rebuild. As Karen prepared to leave, the Luminari elder approached, its crystal form glowing with complex patterns of light. The human Patel is changing, the translator conveyed. When he first came, he was closed, dark. Now he begins to resonate with understanding. Your justice has wisdom we did not expect from such a young species. News of the case and its aftermath spread throughout the Confederation. Other judges began incorporating elements of personal accountability into their verdicts. Several species started studying human legal concepts, finding value in this different approach to justice. When Karen returned to the Confederation Court, she found new respect from her alien colleagues. Judge Zexatul, once so skeptical of human judgment, now regularly consulted her on difficult cases. Your species has much to learn about galactic affairs, the Morrigan judge told her. But perhaps we also have something to learn from you. Karen smiled. One case wouldn't change everything, but it was a beginning. Humanity had taken its first steps toward sharing its values with the stars, proving they deserved their place in the greater galactic community.